tight topics. This one is going to be on brushes. It's going to be basic brushes. There's a lot to learn about brushes, but this is going to be pretty basic. And let's get rid of the little notices that come up. So here we are in Photoshop. I've got a white picture in front of me. I'm going to talk about brushes. To get to brushes, the easiest thing to do is go down, and you'll notice the shortcut key is B. Okay, if you keep on hitting B, it'll cycle through all these, but you don't have to know about these other tools right now. Let's talk about brushes. Brush tool, so B, brush. Okay, and I have a little circle that shows my brush. Now, if you don't get a circle and you have the capital locks key on, all you'll see is that little square. The reason I tell you that is that one day you're going to be sitting there and you can't find the circle, and all you have is that little square. Look down and see your capital lock key. If it's on, that's what you're going to get. The other way you get that little square is if I make this circle real big, and the other shortcut to know is the right and left bracket keys. The bracket keys are the keys next to the P on the keyboard, which are little square brackets. If I hit the right one, it'll get bigger. And so if I hit it big enough, okay, and this thing is a big enough brush, you can see it's off the screen. You can't see it. All you see is the square. So either the capital key or this little square size thing. So if I bring the size back down again, I'll start seeing the brush tool again. All right. That just gets you the brush tool. That's the selection of the brush tool. Let's start with. B is a shortcut, and the bracket, right and left bracket keys will also help you there. Now, once you've selected the B, if you have the brush panel, you have a brush panel, and if you don't have a brush panel, go to Windows and take it, select brushes, and you'll get a brush panel over here on the right. Okay, so I can hit the brush panel, and it gives me the different brushes, and I can also go to the top here and select brushes. So let's look at what's up here on the top. Okay, on the very top, forget this one on the left. There's it's usually the second start this one here. Okay, it shows you that there's a lot of different brushes you can select from. Okay, there's specialty brushes, there's cloud brushes. I've got another video on here about making your own brushes. Okay, 99 and 9/10% of the time you're going to take a soft round brush. Okay, and by soft round brush, that means the hardness is down to 0, and the size is whatever you want it to be. You almost never want to go with a hard brush. When you're brushing with a hard brush, you'll see the edges. Soft, round brush is what you're going to want to do for most of what we want to do in photography. So now I'm on a soft, round brush, okay? So that's the first thing you'll choose, okay? The mode is going to be almost always normal. There's very few times you'll use it any other way. And especially when you use brushes with some of these other tools, you want to use them in a different mode here. So I'm going to keep it normal. Opacity and flow are very important figures. And you notice if I go on the word opacity, I can scrub up, or the word flow. That's changing it with a scrubby. You can change it with a drop down too, but that's so much harder. Just go on the word, okay? And that's true across Photoshop almost anywhere you are. You can use these words and scrub on them, okay? So let's talk about what some of these things do, okay? In terms of opacity, for example, if I got a brush here and I know which color I'm going to paint with. When I go down to the left column and I look down below, these two little icons right here, the white on top of the black. If I hit D, that gives me the default value, which is always black on top of white. So if I paint right now, it's black. If I hit X, it'll toggle between the two. So if I have white up above, I paint with white. Okay, so you can see that. I can paint white all over that black and get rid of it. So let me go back to black and talk about opacity and flow. Okay, right now it's a soft brush, as you can see. The edges are soft. If I were to go back and make that brush hard, you would see the difference here. Okay, so that's the difference between a hard and a soft brush. Like I said, 99% of the time you're going to want to have it soft. All right. So now opacity. If I run opacity down to say, let's say 35 or 25% or something like that. Okay, 25%, close enough. You'll see that it's a lot lighter. If I go back across at 25%, as it crosses, you can see now that it gets darker and darker and darker. So if I keep on going and brushing many times, the opacity builds up. Okay, That's what opacity does. And when you're doing a lot of blending, it's nice to have a low opacity so you can do your blending gently and slowly with a soft brush. Now what does flow do with opacity? Well, let's leave opacity at 27% and let's run the flow down to something that's quite low. And flow should follow opacity roughly, but I'm going to put the flow down quite low. What flow does is the opacity now sets the top limit of 27%. The flow is how fast this comes out. So as I do this, it's very gentle. But if I keep the brush down and keep on going back and forth over the same area, you can see it's building up, building up, building up. It'll build up to 27%, as long as I don't take the brush off. Okay. Now if I take the brush off, it starts again. Now I can build it up more. Take the brush off, start again. So I can get it darker and darker, but if I keep the brush down with flow, it'll keep on going all the way up to 27%. So the flow and opacity can work together to make your job smoother and easier. Okay, there's reasons you'd want to do that. All right, the brush there, as you use these brushes, there is this brush panel I talked about here. Okay, and there's some settings in the brush panel. These brushes, what you're seeing here on the right, the brushes here are very similar to what you saw up here when I dropped this down. Okay, it's very similar to that. So there's some general brushes, there's specialty brushes, things like that. There are some brush settings here which work with a pen, which I use. I use a pen tablet. So for example, if I want to have scattering on my, if you look down below, here's an example of what if I want brush scattering, okay? So I have no scatter now, and if I brush, I get this effect. In order to see it better, let's go up all the way. So if I brush, I have that effect. If I add some scatter to the brush, and this will actually work without a pen, you can see what's happening down below here. Now if I brush, I get scatter, okay? And why would you want to do that? Well, when you're doing a lot of graphics work and things like that, it'll help you do some of the work. So that's what scatter is there. And for me, I can actually control scatter by pen pressure, if you have a pen. There's other things also in this panel here, which you may or may not want to use. All right, especially if you're using a cloud brush, which I explain later in another video, and you want to create smoke. Some of these things come up. The scattering and the transfer and things like that will help you make more realistic smoke. So let's use an example of brushes. Okay, I'm going to go to another picture and how you would use a brush typically, and why you want to use a nice soft brush. This is a picture of Monument Valley. Okay, and on top of the picture over here on the right in the layers here, you'll see I placed a sky picture, so you can see the skies here. Okay, so I'm going to do a very rough and easy blend of that sky into this sky here. Okay, and then I'll use the brush to blend it in. So I'm going to select the bottom picture. I'm going to select the quick select tool, the quick selection tool. I'm just going to drag that over the sky. Now look in the marching ants here, I've got a pretty decent selection. It looks like I got too much over here on this left-hand side. So I'll hit the Option key to deselect that and click on that to deselect that area there. So it's deselected. I haven't quite got enough here, this little mountain sticking over the top, but let's leave that be. I'll blend that in with the tool. Everything else looks okay, all right? So now what I'll do is I'll go to the sky layer and create a mask using that selection. And since there is a selection, the mask will create, we'll use the selection to create the mask. All right, I use that. So you can see the mask here has created that selection. It did hide some mountains over here. And if I go in, this one's selected off pretty well. I on purpose used this picture because it makes a pretty good selection, and the sky looks pretty good right away. But what I like to typically do on skies like this is use the brush tool to go along the horizon and blend it in very easily. I mean, very gently. Okay, so making sure I'm on the mask layer. I'll select brush. I'll run the opacity of brush down to 33% or 30% or something like that. Let's say make it 20%. I'll run the flow down to low number. Then using a large brush, I've got you can see the brush in the sky right here now, in the white clouds. It's a large, small brush. I'm going to use a large brush, and since this is a soft brush, the edges of the brush are blurry, right? So if I go along the mask where I'm showing you with the edge of the brush into the sky, it's going to be a very gentle blending. I'm going to be taking off. I'll be blending. I'll be brushing with black. Okay, so I'll hit X to hide the sky a little bit on the horizon and blend it in with the horizon. So as I go along very carefully along the sky, you'll see that little mountain back there. Let's go back to, there was a little mountain back in the background, and I can very gently starting to appear, and I like that. I'm trying to make it normal. I'm trying not to make sure, and as I go along now, I can sort of blend the sky in gently. That mountain's now there. I like that. And it looks pretty realistic all over. And all I'm doing is making sure that this is nicely blended in so that you don't see a lot of lines. Whoops, little dancing ball here. So if I go to the history panel, let's see the little dancing ball. There you go. You can see I'm just hitting the brush tool quite a bit here, and it had to do some thinking. I did get the sky to show up. Okay, now for example, if I hadn't done that brushing, let's go back to the history panel and go back to before I started brushing here. Okay, well, I did too many brushing, but let's go way back to the beginning. See, it did hide it a little bit more. It's only here saves a certain amount, but when you're starting to blend in skies, using a nice soft brush and the edge of the brush to get rid of any thing along the horizon, I can do that a lot more roughly to make it show up exactly what I'm doing. I'm running the opacity up to pretty high number, flow up to pretty high number. Now if I do that, you'll see a lot more change in the sky back there. See, I'm adding some blue from the old sky back there. And that's not too bad if that's what you want. So I got some blue from the old sky coming back. All right, now if I go back to layers and turn this top layer on and off, you can see there's the blue sky, and I've added some clouds in a nice gentle way with a soft brush. Okay, that's how to use brushes, and that's how to select brushes. I hope that helps.